Welcome to today's episode of Africa Rights Talk. I'm here with Mr. Likho Bottoman from the Department of Basic Education. Can you please introduce yourself, the nature of work that you do, and why we're here today?
My name is Likho Bottoman. I am the Director for Social Cohesion and Equity in Education. I'm an occupational therapist by profession. I work in the Department of Basic Education, leading the portfolio that deals with social cohesion and equity. Part of the work that we do is around promotion of human rights, nation building, peace building, equity and equality issues, gender equality, issues around decolonization of basic education. So looking at, oral history, will give young people an opportunity to go back and cultivate new histories that were never, documented by the mainstream history that we have in the country today. And so part of the work also requires us to promote active citizenry amongst young people as part of the whole agenda of Child and Youth Agency. And so we're here today at the Center for Human Rights in the University of Pretoria. This is a journey that we've worked together for so many years, almost 12 years now. And our journey really is on the National Schools Moot Court program, which we implement with the South African Human Rights Commission and the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. The program is looking at promoting constitutionalism and constitutional literacy amongst young people, because we realize that there is a lot of infringement of human rights, particularly for children. And children don't even know, or they're not even aware that there is infringement of their human rights. And so we are giving young people an opportunity to engage with the Constitution so that they understand what provisions are there for them, for the different kinds of rights that are provided for in that Constitution. And we also then give young people an opportunity to understand how the constitutional veracity is tested in the court of law, so that they understand that you don't just wake up, wipe your eyes, and enter into a debate about the Constitution in court, but that there are processes. But in the process, we then expose young people to the profession of law, so that if they want to take what we expose them to further into a career, that they understand that the law professions are there as an opportunity, like they are in engineering, like they are in science, in teaching, and so forth. We know that not all of them will become law professionals in the end, but at least we know that we would have exposed them to the possibility.
Interesting. That's actually like a lot of inspiration and things to look forward to in the future for the young schools. I wanted to ask also, you mentioned things about nation building, changing how we see education. Are there more reasons why the Department of Education or Basic Education decided to take on this planning and organization of this moot court competition? Is there any reason?
Yeah, besides the fact that, as I was saying, that there is a lot of infringement of constitutional rights of our people, we also are aware that there is a lot of discrimination and prejudice and related intolerance amongst our people. And our people don't understand that there are constitutional rights that are ring-fencing those kinds of discriminations. And so we do want to promote a society that is free from discrimination, as our Constitution is saying. But we also want to prepare young people so that when they leave school, they don't just leave school with a school leaving certificate, which is a certificate of matriculation, but that they also leave school prepared to go into society as law-abiding citizens, as people who will guard against discrimination, and maybe thereby then ensuring that we are preparing an inclusive society, we are preparing a society that is observing the law, a society that understands diversity, a society that understands that for every right there is also a responsibility amongst them. And so that's what we're trying to do with young people, to say that issues of human rights are not adult issues. We want to add and amplify the voice of young people into that conversation, into that narrative, so that as we move along and as we design the improvement of constitutional rights for children, that we don't do it from the top of our heads, but that we would have had some level of consultation and, checking and sounding, board sounding with children about these issues that we're trying to solve.
Interesting. I really second that, and you should keep doing the work that you do. And also, next question is, how is this participation of children, for instance, in this competition, how has this evolved over time since you started?
When we started 12 years ago, the program was almost like an elitist program, because firstly, for you to participate in the program, you have to be you have to have very good verbal communication skills. You have to be like a very good orator. You have to be a very good writer, that kind of a thing. And so if you look at the language landscape in schools, you understand that the higher you go in the quintile system of education, the more likely it is that children will participate in the program, because they're au fait with the English language. They can write it, they can speak it, and they can speak it in public and so forth. But over time, we realize that for this program to be as impactful as it should, we need, to begin to introduce what we call mass participation to the program. The late Professor Haynes, who was walking the journey with us in the University of Pretoria Human Rights Center, was the one who actually pioneered this whole mass participation story in the program. The mass participation story was saying that at least all schools should be able to write an essay to argue whatever case would have put forward in that particular year, that they argue it in writing. And if they write so well and they've got very good arguments in their writing, in their essays, then those essays would be selected so that they then come and present their ideas and their arguments orally at a provincial level. And then there's a process of elimination that happens then at a provincial level, that then they come to the national level. And so we would always see more affluent schools, what we call former Model C schools. But over time, we've then made it a requirement for provincial delegations that come to the national competition, that there must be a spread of quintile schools that come here, that every delegation should have, your quintile 1 and 2 and 3 schools, but also then 4 and 5, which are the much more higher end quintile schools.
Yeah, I agree.
We are viewed as people who are teaching children to be political, because the cases that we give them are usually current cases that are, serving in the Constitutional Court at that particular time, or they've just been resolved, or they are awaiting conclusion by the Constitutional Court. And so we want to give them current issues, so that even though they're simulated cases, but they're cases that they feel are contributing to the real cause. And so they say that we teach children to be political, we teach them to be radical, we teach them about rights, but we don't teach them about responsibilities. And so parents and caregivers and school principals prevent their children from participating in the program. They say that their children are going to be ungovernable, especially if they do that, they form part of the program. And the whole thing that, when children know their rights, they can then stand up for their rights, click their fingers and say, you can't tell me nothing. And I think, adults are afraid of children who have got agency. But from our end as basic education sector, we want to produce young people who have got agency. Child and youth agency is very important. The reason why children today are suffering in silence, they are sexually abused or sexually molested, and they are not reporting, they are bullied, they in schools they administer corporal punishment and they keep quiet about it. It's because they don't know that they've got rights against that. So you want to promote constitutional literacy amongst young children, so that they know what they can demand from society, what they can demand from the state. That's the first thing. The second thing is that our program at the moment is quite exclusionary. we have been able to incorporate participation of learners with special education needs, learners with disabilities in other programming in basic education, in social cohesion and nation building. But this one has been very difficult. But we're really trying our level best to ensure that there is also participation of young people. So as we spring into 2024, we are hoping then that we'll see a much more greater incorporation of learners with special education needs participating.
Interesting. I agree. So yeah, thank you for that insight, Mr. Bottoman. I would like to ask for my next question. We talked about the key challenges. Can you give me some highlights of some of the most memorable times of the competitions, the achievements, the glory times? Yeah.
There are quite a lot that come to mind because we've had quite a lot of them. One that jumps to my head at the moment is the Constitutional Court judges say that many of these children argue better than ordinary counsel in the Constitutional Court. They say they give them a run for their money. They argue as if they are law professionals who have got formal training in law.
Wow.
That's what happens. And every year, that is the feedback that you get from the Constitutional Court judges. The second thing that I could cite is that many of the children who then took law as a profession have done really well in the sector, in the law sector. And many of them study further into postgrad, and we've got a lot of people that came out of the program who are now practicing attorneys. So it's really so nice to see that. But also we've got children who come to this national program who say that if it was not for this program, I never would have jumped on a plane in my life. Because where I come from, we don't travel by plane. We don't even dream about traveling by plane. And so that one-time, one-touch experience of that child changes the trajectory of that child forever. Because they would have flown, they would have come to sleep in hotels, they engage with law professionals and attorneys.
People of the same intellectual.
Yes, they get all of that exposure and it changes their life in a different way. And sometimes they even write to us these very nice, heartwarming letters to thank us, and it's just so amazing.
Great. My follow-up question would have been, you already touched on it, some parts of it, the impact so far on the learners and the scholars, but I think I've got some of the insights from you already. So my last question for the interview is, how do you envision the future of this competition?
We want to see more mass participation because we haven't quite achieved that. We're trying, but it's still very few schools that are participating. In South Africa, we've got 16,000 secondary schools. But I think in totality, if you look at, looking at the schools that write the essays all the way up to where we are now, we're still counting hundreds of schools. I'm looking forward to a future where we at least now begin to count thousands of schools. Even if we don't have all 16,000 of them, but at least can we just have thousands of schools and not count hundreds of schools? I know that it is going to be a lot of work for those who have to mark these essays, because it's a lot of them now coming from everywhere, and already we are underwater, in terms of the marking. But that's where we need to go. We need to help young people understand that they can participate in this program. This is not a program of English home language or English first language speakers only. It's for all of us, which then leads me to the second point, that I also want to see the participation of learners with special education needs, especially those that are using sign language, because we want to see that diversity, including language diversity that we want to see in the future. Because in ordinary courts of law, all languages are used, and then there are interpretation services that are happening there. And some children would have got an interest in law, but they may be experiencing language barriers, and so they may be holding back from participating. So you want to say that even if you speak Afrikaans, please come and participate, and you'll argue in Afrikaans, and there will be interpretation services like there is in the real world. And so even if you speak Xhosa or Zulu or Sotho, you can be able to do that. So we do really want to ensure that these programs that we put out we dissolve the elitist elements of them so that every child is able to participate.
I agree 100%. That's actually important, really. Thank you so much, Mr. Bottoman, for taking time of your day to come have this interview. It's a very busy day today, I'm very sure.
Yes.
So I'm so glad that we have this interview. So, and I hope that the things that you envision for the competition comes to life in the future. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, Vicky.